It's Sunday, September 27, 2014, and I'm here trying to repair the inwale on my Bell Wildfire. We got a crack in the inwale. It goes from the hull almost to the edge, but it's not through. It's not broken through. And then on the side we have a crack with rotted wood, and it's extending back towards the stern, but it's not connected up yet with that crack on the top. And underneath, the inwale is solid. It's not cracked through on the bottom. So we're going to try to fix this by filling it up with epoxy. Now, of course, putting a new inwale or an entire set of gunnels on the boat would probably be the best thing to do, except that's expensive and I don't want to spend the money. So I've gotten a lot of good advice on how to repair this from the guys on canoetripping.net. Very helpful, knowledgeable people. And we're going to try to fill up these cracks with GFlex epoxy. And one of the people on canoetripping.net suggested I get a dental pick and scraper from my dentist. I used one, which I did. He had a used one he gave me, because we're going to try to clean out the rotten and dried out wood from inside those cracks. The dental pick, which I'm not sure the camera is focusing on, is nicely shaped to try to scrape out some of that wood, which I've already scraped some out. Let's just do a little. It fits in nicely. This one hook is a little bit shallower. It gets in there. Stuff is falling out the bottom. I don't know if you can see it. If I can reach in this side here, I can actually hook this thing. It's coming out the top. So this side crack is connected. If you can see the little hook coming out right here, it's all hooked in there. So this works quite well for scraping out these loose wood chips. Although I'm starting to think, since the wood chips are all dry, they're not wet. This canoe has been dried out for weeks. But maybe it's not so bad to leave some of those wood chips in there to solidify with the epoxy. But I've never worked with this epoxy, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure I can get all the chips out anyway. I think I'm going to put the epoxy in from the top. Which means I'm going to tape off this side crack, since I don't want the glue to come squirting out the side. I've been told that in order to prevent tape and my fingers and everything else from sticking to the epoxy as it dries, I should use wax paper. But of course, no one's had wax paper since the 1950s. So I got this stuff from my supermarket deli. It's what they wrap liverwurst in here. So I figure that this paper has a coating of boar's head light brown Schweiger liverwurst, and that there's no way the epoxy is going to stick through this grease. So I'm going to put a little piece of this quasi wax paper along that crack and then tape it. Okay, I've got the gunnel taped up. And I've taped a garbage bag underneath because I can't brush my teeth or put mustard on a hot dog without spilling the ointment on the floor. So we'll hope the garbage bag protects the inside of the hull. I've got it all taped underneath. I didn't put my quasi wax paper underneath the inwale because I couldn't do that well. Plus I don't care if the tape sticks under there, you can't see there. I've taped the outside. If you look at the dark gaps, the light line through the middle of the dark gap is the hull. So I'm going to be squeezing GFlex epoxy in between the hull and the inwale, and partly there between the hull and the outwale. And then I'm going to decide whether I'm going to clamp it or not. Again, on the advice of people who've used GFlex epoxy, I got this West System aluminum boat repair kit. I paid $24 and change from an Amazon vendor. Including shipping, it was about $28 and change. The words aluminum boat are not particularly relevant. It's just that in different of these kits they have different tools. And we'll look at what's in this kit, which is just what I need. This is adhesive filler. This is to thicken the epoxy. I don't think I'm going to use this. I've had some discussions about whether to use it or not. I don't think I'm going to thicken the epoxy. We have 2 mixing cups. This is the epoxy resin. This is the hardener, which you use in a 1-to-1 ratio. There are 2 syringes, so I'm going to mix up the epoxy and then try to pour it into the syringe. I think that'll be mess number 1. And then use the syringes to squeeze the epoxy into the gaps. We have 4 rubber gloves and 2 mixing sticks, 1 curved end, 1 flat end. Well, that's interesting. I don't know which end to use for which. I guess you would use the flat end for the epoxy, and maybe this top end for your thumb. So I'm going to squeeze a bunch of the 2 things in there and then mix it up. I'm not going to show that on camera. It'd be kind of boring. Plus I'll probably screw it up. Can't tell if this is recording. Alright, what I did is I took the plunger out after mixing it and poured the stuff from the cup into the syringe. I didn't know how to get the air out of it. In fact, there's all little air bubbles in this epoxy. So I must have mixed it too aggressively or something, but I've got a million little air bubbles. But when you put the plunger in, there's a big air bubble between the plunger and the epoxy. So I just held it up in the air like this and squirted it out like they do in the doctor shows. And the air squirted out along with a little of the epoxy. I now think it's ready to try to stick it in. I don't know if it's going to fit out that hole, but we'll see. Otherwise I'll have to snip the end of the syringe a little more. Alright, we're going to give this a go and see if I can squeeze it in there. It's coming out very slowly out of this syringe. I'm thinking of cutting it. Well, I ended up using that whole tube, and I'm still not full up. I also ended up snipping off the end of the syringe a little bit. I have a little bit more in the cup. See, I'm not sure what's in the camera here. Take out the plunger. Try to pour in the rest of the stuff. Pour in the rest of the glue. It's already hardening. It's hot out today. Probably 80. It's not going to flow very much more. So you see when I put the plunger in, there's a big air gap. So I'll let that float closer to the top, I guess. Here we go. Alright. Try to stick more in. This is taking a lot of epoxy. This was really rotted out. It's almost hollow. Well, I had to use another syringe full. I think this is as full as I'm going to get it, both on the out whale to the hull and the in whale to the hull. Now I've been debating ever since I thought about this project whether to clamp this, and experimenting before I epoxied it, I think I'm just going to clamp it with slight pressure. And this kind of a clamp is a good tool for that kind of a clamp. It's a trigger clamp. You squeeze the trigger and it gets closer, so you can set it to whatever pressure you want. You pull the second trigger and you can lengthen it out there, if you can see that. I can't see the screen as I'm doing this. So I'm going to just put slight pressure on it. Get some of my make-believe wax paper, my liverwurst paper. Well, this has been the hardest thing so far. Clamping it right on that bump that needs to be shaved off. And that is squeezing some of it out there. Some of the glue is squeezing out. I think it'll flatten by itself due to gravity. And I assume I can sand it once it's dry. Well, that'll be it. We'll let it dry for 24 hours outside. Well, it's 24 hours later, and I've taken the tape off, although we have in the cracks between the outwale and the inwale some blue tape residue. I found I could scrape it off with a knife and with this dental scraper. There's a couple problems remaining. Well, first let's look at the inside. The inside came out quite smooth. Where that bump was and where I had my fake wax paper, my liverwurst paper, the liverwurst paper worked. It peeled right off with no residue. There's some tape residue here which I found I can scrape off with a knife. And this bump, which used to be a bump right there, is really no longer a bump. It used to be right here. In fact, I had the clamp pressing right there, so there's now actually a slight concavity where there used to be a bump. Now, the biggest problem is what happened when I put the clamp on. As I was putting the GFlex, as I was flowing it into these cracks, it had an amber color. And it was looking amber the entire time I was floating it in. But once I put the clamp on and squeezed, some of the GFlex upwelled from deeper inside and came out here. And it's got sort of it looked milky white when it came out. And now it's dried into sort of a yellowish, milky yellowish. So now I'm wondering whether I should have clamped it or not. The only reason I can think for that is that it's air bubbles that do that. A gazillion little air bubbles getting squashed and now diffracting the light into a different color from the natural sort of amber or caramel color of the GFlex. And another remaining problem is there's still a crack here. I have to flow some more into this crack right here. And this whole side here is actually a depression. It's not flat along the top. So I'm thinking of trying to flow some thickened epoxy onto the top to fill up that depression. Although that gives me all sorts of risks of leaking, dribbling, dripping. But I'm gonna tape it up again, mix some more epoxy, flow it into this crack, and think about using that silica thickener to put thickened epoxy on the top, because I know I can sand this, because I could actually cut away this epoxy with my knife. It's sliceable, so I'm sure it's sandable. The tape all came off. All the tape that was underneath the gunnels, both on the inside and the outside, came off easily. So maybe I didn't even need the liverwurst paper. But you can see here, if you can see it, it's actually bowed down now. The inwale sort of is bowed down with sort of a bulge, I guess, of epoxy in there, which is fine. I'm sure this gunwale is quite strong here now. It's just that it doesn't look so nice. But after I finish all this up, I'm going to sand it and re-oil the gunwales. You can sort of see the indentation on the top here also from this direction. So back to mixing. I was also concerned about cleaning off the GFlex encrusted syringe, mixing stick, and cup. And someone on canoetripping.net suggested I use white vinegar, which I did. I sucked up vinegar into that syringe and wiped the mixing stick with it. I left it floating in there overnight, although I don't know if that was necessary. The cup I didn't try to salvage because I cracked it when I was creasing it to pour it into the syringe. I cracked the cup, but that's no big loss. We'll see if we can clean up this syringe and reuse it. Well, I've taped under and along the side of the gunwales, and I've left the tape sticking up above the level of the gunwale. And I've bent this one up a little on this side to try to make a little trench kind of a thing. I don't know how this is going to work. I used the second syringe in the kit because if you recall the first syringe yesterday, I clipped the end of it. And because I clipped the end of it to make it wider, it doesn't fit in this narrow crack here. I'm hoping this one will better, the narrower one, which is going to be hard to flow in, but here we go. I suppose if I had a heat gun of some sort, or if I had a 50-foot extension cord, I could bring my hairdryer out here and heat this up, which supposedly makes it flow easier. Well, it's not going down any further. In fact, it's bubbling up on the top. So I'm going to take the rest of this, mix up some thickener, see how that works. I suspect it'll change the color. But since I got that yellowish, ugly blob in the middle, I don't really care about that too much. Well, sure enough, this thickener is a white powder, some kind of silica powder, and when you mix it in here, it's a pale lemon yellow color, which this is really going to be ugly now. A better idea would be to mix sawdust into this stuff, but I don't have sawdust. I don't know. What the heck, this is all an experiment. If this doesn't work, I can just rip the whole thing out. I'm not going to try to put this on with the syringe. I'm just going to try to spoon it on and see what happens. This is going to look ugly. I suppose a little bit too much is better than too little, since I can sand it off. I think I'll just let gravity float it down. I just don't want it to run over the sides of my blue barriers here, which it's about up to the top of them. Well, we'll just have to wait another 24 hours. I found the cleaning the small nozzle syringe that I used for today's narrow crack. It's hard to get that GFlex out of there. The white vinegar worked. I used acetone. I put it in the bucket and sucked the acetone up into the syringe and squirted it out. The acetone seemed to clear it out faster than the white vinegar, but the white vinegar did work to clean everything. But the acetone also seems to work, and a little faster. Of course, it's more toxic. Make sure you wear gloves for all this stuff. Well, we'll see what happens tomorrow. Well, it's 24 hours later again, the third day. I've taken the tape off and I've carved and sanded the epoxy. It had been built up in between the two upright pieces of tape and formed sort of a rectangular trench, which was sticking up proud above the gunnel. And it had sharp edges on it, at least 1/8 of an inch above the gunnel. So I tried sanding, but I found that the easier thing to do was to take my knife and just carve away the sharp edges. Of course, I was pushing with two hands a lot doing this, and then I found out that I just would angle the knife and I was taking off a lot of the shavings. You can see the curlicues, that's where I was carving the edges off, and all of these other shavings, and there's a lot more on the ground, were for just moving the knife back and forth, sometimes pushing with two hands, sometimes pulling it like a draw knife, sometimes with the back of the blade. And then I used various grits of sandpaper, and here it is. It's all fair and smooth, no lumps, it's all blended in. Take a look at the other side, the inside. We can do some more sanding. I should have sanded the wood cleaner before I started this job. So it's all pretty level. I shouldn't have that chair in the background, but the gunnel is pretty level now. And you can see where we once had the bulge before we began the project. Well, that's gone. That was gone when I squashed it with the clamp. So, what do I think of this project? Well, I have no doubt that it has worked structurally. The GFlex is the newest West epoxy. The older one I think is called 105. And the GFlex is more elastic. It will bend and rebound better than the 105. which is good for gunnels since they are subject to some sideways loads and vertical loads, because where this damage is right about where my crossbars on my roof of my van cross the gunnels. On the other hand, the 105, Wes said, is really better for carving and sanding, and that's what I did mostly. I wasn't gluing something together, I was more filling. But I don't regret using the GFlex. What I do think I regret is using that mixture, that thickening mixture of silica, which has created this yellowish patch now. I don't care for the aesthetics, although it doesn't look too bad now that I've sanded down the surrounding wood to a whiter color. The rest of it needs to be badly cleaned up. So if I had it to do over again, I would have first of all sanded down the wood, even though it was rotted and cracked, to a much lighter color, and then I would not have used the filler to thicken it. I would have just waited for the epoxy to thicken by itself a little, so I would have had more of a clear amber color. But it's not bad. It doesn't look too bad. I think I'm going to, instead of oiling the gunnels, which I do not do regularly, I think I'm going to use a wipe-on varnish and see how that looks. And if that doesn't look so good after a few coats, I'll probably varnish the whole thing, although I'm kind of lazy to do that. So I will take pictures of this when it's all varnished and completely sanded and varnished. I'll post the pictures on canoetripping.net. There's already a thread there called repair of cracked inwale or something like that, and you can see the final pictures of the project there.